Gonna go ahead and get started. So the presentation topic today is gut health and where to start. We hear a lot about gut health and don't really know what it really means sometimes. It's kind of vague. So we wanted to give you guys an indicator on, some of the areas of focus that we can discuss, as dietitians, and help to guide you in the right direction and elude misinformation as well. So, the objectives of this presentation are to explain what gut health is, the connections of gut health to other conditions, and ways to improve our gut health overall. And I'm Katie, by the way. I'm one of the dietitians here with the program. So, your gut health is your GI system. It has a couple different areas, such as your stomach, your intestines, and your colon. So, it's responsible for digesting and absorbing nutrients from food and excreting waste. Now, we have about 200 different species of bacteria in the gut, including bacteria, viruses, and fungi, all live in our large intestine. And the bacteria and other microorganisms in your gut are known as your gut microbiome. And the bacteria help us to break down food and can turn the food that we eat into nutrients that our body can use. So our gut is really responsible for a lot. And I won't bore you with all the details, but essentially we digest and absorb all of our nutrients in our gut as well. So you could see kind of starting with the esophagus, moving our way down into the stomach area. We can see where nutrition is absorbed. So sometimes patients will have colon cancer, unfortunately, or they will have some form of diverticulitis of some kind, where parts of the duodenum or parts of the ileum are removed or cut out. So sometimes that puts them at a risk of certain vitamin deficiencies. So depending on where things are removed, we need to be very careful. So our goal, though, is to help to heal the gut and to help to make our gut work really well so that we aren't at risk of micronutrient deficiencies. So I just wanted to point out one thing is that we have our esophagus, which was up here, but then we also have our intestines. And many of our patients do have that gastroesophageal reflux disease, that GERD as we know it. And this mainly impacts the upper digestive system and can cause things like heartburn, the indigestion, agita, etc. So the general guidelines for GERD are to eat slower, avoid lying down directly after a meal, try to not eat too much at that meal, and avoiding things that weaken the esophageal sphincter, alcohol, caffeine, the acidic foods. There's many different triggers depending on the person, but we have a whole video on just GERD. So I do encourage people to watch that one, and it's on our website as well as on YouTube. So if you're specifically here for GERD, that would be also a great video to check out. I think we did that one last summer. So our gut microbiome, like I said, it does contain a lot of different types of bacteria that contribute to disease, but also protect against disease. So some microorganisms are actually beneficial and necessary for the body. But variety in the gut is an important indicator of the health of your gut microbiome. So an example of bad bacteria is something like E. coli. An example of good bacteria is something like bifidobacterium or lactobacillus. Some people take probiotics for this, which we will be discussing as well. So, moving over to, okay, so what are some signs of poor gut health? Oh, well, of course, digestive systems such as gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and heartburn. However, there are other issues that people can experience. And it's not even just limited to this, but definitely sleep disturbances and general fatigue, mood or emotional state such as depression, anxiety. People don't realize that a lot of our serotonin is produced in our gut. So if our gut health is altered, it can actually impact our mental health and vice versa. People with depression sometimes have stomach issues, anxiety, IBS, those types of things. And then also just having frequent infectious illnesses can also be a sign that something is wrong with our gut, or there's some form of weakening in our gut, because our immune health is very closely linked to our gut too. So it is very important to have good gut health, and unfortunately many of us don't have the best gut health, and that's why we're watching this video. So what the term that we might have heard is something called leaky gut syndrome. Now, this is not recognized as a medical diagnosis per se. It's becoming more and more, I guess, accepted by the medical community. But essentially, our mucus lining of our intestines are designed to absorb water and nutrients from our food into our bloodstream. So the food particles go in, they get absorbed, and then we're good. This is a normal gut. It's believed that some individuals may have increased permeability. So basically, you can see there's something called tight or gap junctions here. They should be very tight. We shouldn't really be able to squeeze in large particles of any kind. But unfortunately, due to many different reasons, these tight junctions get weak and they get spaced out and they become leaky. Therefore, certain things such as bad bacteria, viruses, certain things such as proteins that are hard to digest, such as gluten, they get into that bloodstream, and that causes some form of toxicity, or lipopolysaccharides, they're called, where they're like bad bacteria that can come in and wreak havoc on our system. It's basically like attacking. So, we can strengthen the gut. So when people say, oh, I want to improve my gut health, it really means how can we tighten these gap junctions again? And also, what's causing them to be weak in the first place? Is it diet? Is it a food allergy? Is it an inflammation of some kind? So we need to first figure that out too. So diseases that are associated with leaky gut, meaning that put you at a higher risk of these gap junctions becoming weak, include celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition that rears people allergic to gluten, which is found in the wheat plant, and also something called inflammatory bowel disease. There are a couple different classes, but most notably diverticulitis and Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. So the things that end in itis, basically that inflammation of the gut lining, can cause this. However, there are disease associations that might not be as in your face, such as low grade inflammation. So something chronic over time, such as obesity, arthritis, asthma, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, these slow grade inflammations that fighting and breaking down the immune system, weakening that gut lining, and then wreaking havoc on the gap junctions. Liver disease, some fatty liver might also cause some inflammation. So who's to say? But in general, we know that cardiometabolic disease does not really help our gut. It can hurt our gut long term. So, how poor gut health affects the body. Of course, I already mentioned, feelings of discomfort, right? Abdominal pain. It can lead to food sensitivities. So, people think that food sensitivities, it's because of the food. A lot of times, it's just because your gut is weak. So, whatever you eat a lot of is going to cause problems. So, we don't really recommend food sensitivities. It really depends on the person, like the testing. So, definitely speak to your doctor about that, or dietitian. But most commonly, it's the bloat, it's the indigestion, it's the diarrhea, it's the fatigue. Severe cases can lead to things such as more serious, such as peptic ulcer disease, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, also known as SIBO. And of course, that gut brain connection can be impacted and can lead to anxiety and depression. So, where do we start? What do we do? And how can we improve? Basically, number one is you definitely want to rule out any determined diseases, right? Any diagnoses that we know are causing a problem. So we always recommend that you stay up to date with your colonoscopy and endoscopy. When you come in for your WTC exam, we always ask, when your last endoscopy was, colonoscopy, if you need a GI referral. So it really depends on health risk, but it's usually every few years, or if you're having symptoms. So you can always ask your your WTC provider for a referral. And then, of course, following up with your GI doctor. Now, there's certain testing that we do not cover, such as SIBO breath testing, which can diagnose that bad bacteria. I believe that they will scope for H. pylori, like do a biopsy when you get an endoscopy. So that is always something to ask about. That is a bacterial overgrowth that can happen in the upper part of the stomach, and that can cause a lot of problems for people. And then celiac disease testing, aka that gluten allergy, that is not something that WTC covers, but we do see it a lot. So I always recommend people ask their GI doctor for blood work for that, or they can actually biopsy when you're getting a colonoscopy as well. So there are, diagnoses out there that we want to rule out, because if we're living with something like celiac and don't know it and eating gluten, it's going to cause a problem. But another way to do it, if you've been ruled out for all those other conditions, is to start tracking symptoms and tracking your food. So writing down what you eat every day and any symptoms you're experiencing. The more data that you have, the more connections you can potentially make. And this is really great to, bring to a doctor or bring to a dietitian who can see patterns and can help you to see, okay, well, on these days where you ate eggs, you're having a problem. Why don't we cut out eggs for a little bit and see if that helps to heal some inflammation? Then we'll add them back in. And I just use eggs as an example, but sometimes that causes problems, or nuts, or you name it, red meat, fried foods, gluten, dairy, soy. So everyone's different. But there are apps as well that make it a little easier. Monash is this green, blue one with the gut symbol. And then Cara Care is also a great one for tracking symptomology as well. You can track your food, you can track your stool, you can track your symptoms. It's pretty cool. It takes the guesswork out. So those are ones that I recommend. And then you have to remember that there's different reasons for people having issues. This is something that I use as a dietitian. It's basically like a chart. So have you lost weight recently? If no, it's probably not, one of these two. So it kind of tells you what symptoms you might be at risk of. Like if you're losing weight rapidly, having a lot of stomach issues, it might be something like a celiac disease. But if you're gaining weight, it could be more like an IBS. So that's what we use on our end, but just know that there's different issues such as irritable bowel disease, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, pancreatic insufficiency, carbohydrate intolerance, etc. So then, of course, when we do those food diaries, whether it's in our head or on paper, we want to reflect on our dietary choices, such as how much fiber we're consuming, the times in which you're eating, and the speed in which you're eating. And lastly, is it truly a food that's triggering any symptoms? So the first step, I always like to talk about fiber when we're talking about gut health, because it is a double-edged sword, as I like to say, meaning that fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate with many health benefits. Insoluble fibers such as wheat bran and vegetables such as broccoli, they add bulk to the stool so they can help to move things out. Whereas soluble fiber help us to retain water and turns to gel, kind of smooths everything out, such as oatmeal or chia seeds, beans, nuts, etc. And that actually has beneficial effects for cholesterol and blood sugar because that gel kind of gelatinizes and helps to like suck everything out, which is great. And the general goal is 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day, or about 14 grams for every 1,000 calories. So give or take. And those with gut health issues may have a hard time digesting certain types of fiber because they're hard on the gut lining, basically hard to break down. So the names of these carbs are listed here. They're really long, so I'm not going to even attempt, but it's FODMAP are the types of fermentable carbohydrates that can cause problems. So oligosaccharides, for example, apples contain a fructose, or broccoli contain fructans, and they fall into these categories. Beans, cauliflower, but then there's also things like chewing gum because they contain polyols, which are sugar alcohols. So sometimes it's not it's the good stuff too that can cause problems, such as broccoli is super healthy, but sometimes people can't tolerate it. It needs to be cooked or chewed really, really well. And there is a low FODMAP diet that people can follow if you're having IBS and you think that you need to restrict. So we are happy to work with you on that. Again, yeah, how to manage FODMAPs. If you notice symptoms after eating certain high FODMAP foods, it's kind of small here, but we can see certain fruits like apples with the skin, or certain dairy products, or wheat, cabbage, onions, garlic. If this is resonating with you, you might be sensitive to FODMAPs. So sometimes we try to omit them for a few weeks. And if we get symptoms that resolve, that's great. And then we slowly add them back in one at a time. And if something really wreaks havoc, you might have a sensitivity to it, or maybe until we heal the gut, that's a food that's not agreeing with you. So just know that everybody is different though. Some people are like, no, I'm absolutely fine with beans, but broccoli kills me. It really depends on the person. So that's why it's good to work with a one-on-one with a dietitian to help you navigate this. And lastly, remembering just general food choices. You are what you eat. So greasy, oily, fatty, or fried foods can often trigger symptoms like bloating, acid reflux, or that general sort of indigestion. And examples also of something that can be a problem is high sugar meals or high sugar beverages can lead to carb dumping, where we kind of get that diarrhea after a really sweet meal. And that can be due to water being pulled and then released in our gut tract. So I give the example here of, these three meals. They're looking like off kind of fast food area. I mean, this maybe looks like Subway, but it's still a very high calorie content. This is very processed. Same thing with this burger and fries. But here we have a lot more whole foods. Here we can see real strawberries. We got some oatmeal, some eggs, some cold brew coffee, not a coffee with a lot of cream and sugar. We've got some veggies here, some protein, some sweet potatoes. So, just trying to also think about caloric intake. You'd probably feel just as full off of this as you would with this, and it's half the amount of calories. So sometimes just the amount of calories at one time can also cause problems. And being overweight leads to gut health issues because you have a lot of pressure on that gut esophageal sphincter that links to your esophagus and your stomach, and it's constant pressure. So wearing tight clothing, etc. So that's a lot of this we go over in our GERD video. So please refer to that if this is resonating with you. And I always like to highlight, gut-loving foods, things that are really healthy for the gut that people could eat more of to help to strengthen their gut lining. One is definitely, if you can tolerate, of course, no FODMAP issues, prebiotic foods such as asparagus, basically that feeds the good bacteria. We've got kimchi here, which is basically similar to sauerkraut. It's like a fermented food, so it's a natural source of probiotics. We've got some artichokes, which is a prebiotic, great source of fiber. Our gut microbiome, our healthy bacteria loves artichokes. And then Greek yogurt contains active cultures, so it has high protein as well as those probiotics, and it can help to really feel full. Oatmeal here we can see, or muesli at least, some whole grain, some good fiber. Raspberries are the highest fiber fruit, so we always recommend those. They have 8 grams per 1 cup, so you're almost a quarter of the way of your fiber in one day. And I like these overnight oats because this is an easy way. You get some chia seed from some soluble fiber. You get some yogurt, some peanut butter, some berries. So just things you can add to your diet as well. And I always like to highlight certain times we think that we are doing the right thing because we're trying to cut calories, we're trying to reduce our calorie intake, our carb intake, but then we end up causing more problems because now we're eating very processed foods. And by processed, I mean very lengthy ingredient list with chemicals. So, soluble corn fiber, what is that? Things we can't find in nature. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol. These Quest bars, they cause a lot of people to have like bloating and gas. And I always say, listen, it might be the erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol. Same thing in Halo Top, that ice cream, that diet ice cream that people like. A lot of patients get diarrhea and bloating from it, and it's because of the erythritol and the cellulose gum, the xanthan gum. These are all high FODMAP things. And then, of course, our sugar-free creamer coffees contain soybean oil, which is not good for our gut lining, and carrageenan, as well as sugar substitutes like sucralose or ACE K, which we know long term are not very good for us for different health issues. So, things that we can do instead would be to switch to more natural ingredient type of foods. So, I like to say, like, try and aim for foods you can pronounce the ingredient list with. So, comparing this Quest bar ingredient list to something like an RX bar that's just dates, egg whites, cashews, almonds, chocolate, natural flavors. Not sure what those are. That's a little mystery. But sea salt, we got our coffee creamer here, Natural Bliss, it's called. Still vanilla, still has sugar, but the ingredients are just skim milk, cream, sugar, and natural flavor, which is coming from the vanilla. And this ice cream too. I like the Turkey Hill All Natural Slow Churn. It's a great choice. It's lower in calories. It's only milk, cream, sugar, vanilla, natural flavors, and beans. So weight loss aside, just improving the quality of our food, people tend to feel better, and sometimes that's what it takes to start losing weight. If that's a goal of yours, is to improve your gut health and get your gut stronger, then some of the inflammation subsides, and then we can actually release some body fat. Um, so a lot of times people ask me, okay, what's the deal with probiotics? And the deal is that it's very, very specific, and it should be based on a symptom and a need and a dietary case by case basis. Because if you are lacking certain strains, you're going to want to go on a certain probiotic strain. So there is not a one size fits all. A lot of the ones on the market don't even reach the gut because they disintegrate before they even make it to the small or large intestine where we want it to go. It just dies in the stomach. So it doesn't even have any health benefit. But natural sources of probiotics can include something like kimchi, that fermented cabbage, sauerkraut, which can be eaten. It's a little salty, so I say recommended in moderation. Yogurt and kefir are great choices, but we want to make sure we're not doing ones that are very high in added sugar. But yogurt is a wonderful food. I recommend people eat it all the time, especially that Greek yogurt or the Icelandic yogurt, because it's got that good high protein and it has low sugar. And then some people ask me about kombucha. It's a drink that's basically made from probiotics, but it has a lot of sugar. So I usually recommend to not really go too crazy with that, but it can be a conversation worth having, especially if we're, say, instead of having a Snapple or instead of having soda, people want to switch to a kombucha. Okay, then let's talk about it. Maybe it's making a one swap for another. And then in general, we have to also remember eating, timing, and style. So there's some tips here: relaxing before you eat and connecting to what you're eating and taking a few slow bites at one time. A lot of people tell me, oh, I was just in Italy. I could eat whatever I wanted, or I was on vacation. I ate everything, but my stomach was fine. It was likely that you weren't just shoveled over your desk, like eating really quickly in a stressful work environment, or you're on the way to drop off the kids and you're, trying to shove in a protein bar. We're sitting, we're relaxing, we're eating slowly, we're digesting our food properly. Sometimes that makes all the difference. It's just the environment in which we're in. So when you slowly and thoroughly chew your food, you break your meal down into smaller, more digestible bites, and the smaller pieces also increase the amount of surface area on the digestive for the digestive enzymes to work on to help you break that food down better, so it's not seeping into those gap tight junctions. Um, and eating quickly can lead to indigestion, bloating, and gas because we are swallowing air. So I always recommend just take a little bit of time to eat each meal, and we want to pay attention to our food, pausing and breathing, checking in. Am I full? Am I starting to get full? Maybe I should stop. Maybe I should take some leftovers for tomorrow, or maybe I'll eat it in 20 minutes or a half an hour if I'm still hungry. Those are all fine. The food isn't going anywhere. So please just think about eating mindfully and chewing your food well, almost to the point of applesauce consistency, especially if you have a hard time with bloating. It might be because you're not chewing your food well enough. And another one that we really love to recommend is to move after a meal. Not anything strenuous, no like, you know, burpees or a high intensity spin class, but just a light, brisk walk after a meal can do two things. It can kind of help to digest and relieve bloating, but it also helps with blood sugar getting absorbed into the muscles. So that is actually going to be better for energy purposes. And it also leads to less of a fatigue after eating. So we love a gentle walk after a meal. And for example, like I ate lunch really quickly before this presentation, so that breathe I just did was probably because I ate my lunch too fast. So do as I say, not as I do. And overall, just reflecting on our overall habits, right? We are what we repeatedly do. And once we're aware of our bad habits, we can try and replace them with better ones. So we first make our habits and then our habits make us. So we can change, but it takes time, right? If you're a police officer, first responder of some kind, you might be used to eating on the go. You might not know where your next meal's coming from, so you're shoving it in. But if you're tired now and you have more time, take the time. It really can do a world of wonders. And also take time to decide what we should eat, plan ahead, meal prep, strategize, really creating that healthy habit for long-term success. And again, health habits that we think could really be a great place to start. One is just the timing in which you're eating. So avoid eating and lying down. Ideally, try to stop eating 3 hours before bed. That would be the golden rule, but definitely a minimum of 2 hours before bed. We really shouldn't be eating so that we're not going horizontal and that food isn't regurgitating. Now, also looking at your quality of your meal. I like to say, does this meal contain a color? So start by prioritizing adding colorful fruits or veggies to that meal or a snack. Phytochemicals, so think like red, orange, yellow, blue, all those different colors of the rainbow that we could eat. Blueberries, red bell peppers, spinach, that really deep, rich color. It represents phytochemicals and that those can be transformed into antioxidants that can help to fight those anti-inflammatory compounds for your gut. So it basically provides that bacteria with ammo to help fight off illness. So it's really truly medicine for yourself. Food is your medicine. And we don't want to get caught empty handed. What I mean by that is try to plan meal or snacks ahead of time so we're not stuck running errands and then just stopping for fast food or eating junk food. So that would be a big one to really think about. And remember that coffee is not a meal. Coffee on an empty stomach is really not recommended. It's very hard on the gut lining and can cause a lot of inflammation, a lot of indigestion and heartburn when you do eat. So avoid coffee on an empty stomach if you can by delaying your coffee until you've had a meal or a snack. You can have water or hot tea, but try to avoid that coffee. And that's a hard one. And Catherine is our intern, and she's here today with us as well. And she also brought a really great point of to our attention, which is there are other things that can cause your body to have sensitivities and inflammation that have nothing to do with the food you eat, but the chemicals that we're exposed to. So obviously, we know from being down at ground zero, all of those toxic inhalants and exposures cause a lot of people to have GERD and sinusitis, rhinosinusitis. So we also know there's toxins in our everyday products, such as our cleaning products, our fabric softeners, detergents, dishwasher pods, a lot of those synthetic fragrances, think Glade, Febreze, Airwicks, that you can really cause a lot of problems. And even like the scents in Yankee candles. So be very careful about what you expose yourself to in a environment, and using eco-friendly products has actually been associated with decreasing the likelihood of becoming overweight in children. I don't have the article linked here, but it was from the European Journal of Nutrition in 2019. So it's just really interesting. So I think we're learning more about this as time goes on. And hopefully next year we do a webinar on this topic because I find it very interesting. And then that's really it. So I want to thank you for attending today. If I don't know if the chat is available, but if anyone does have questions, actually I can unmute if needed, that you want to ask me, feel free. I'm going to stop the recording now. So it's all good. But thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.